Hey guys, and welcome back. So in this video, I wanted to talk about some of the more commonly used hard surface brushes. So I have my cube here. I'm just going to activate Dynamesh here. And whoops, that wasn't Dynamesh. So it's over here, Dynamesh. Right. I've gone through some of these kind of in my previous videos, but there are quite a few tools or brushes that you would use commonly in hard surface designs. And why you would use them is because they give you some nice control over the smoothness and sharpness of your mesh. And I'll go through some of the ones that I use. Your main one, or we'll start off with ones that we'll sort of be using a lot. And that's your, it's not really a hard surface brush, but it's a good brush for sort of concepting designs or making sort of cuts and things like that. But you will use your clay buildup or your clay brush. So your clay brush is B, C, and that is this one here, which is L. And what this is good for is just making some quick concept designs. So I have my object here. I have it rotated the wrong way. Okay. And what the clay brush is good for is just making quick designs. So if you want to sort of concept some panels or some sort of features or something like that, you want to do something like this. And it's good because it's not such a harsh brush. You get this sort of softer edge, and it doesn't build up as much. And yes, it is very messy, and that's kind of part of it. As we're sort of concepting these ideas, we just want to get quick and dirty, right? We don't really want to spend too much time in how it's sort of looking. I think the concepting or the clay brush is good for building up surface areas, but keeping the area relatively smooth as well, right? So that's a good brush for sort of concepting designs or building up surfaces. You can even do something like that, or hold down Alt and it sort of go in, or just sort of filling in areas. So quite often when we're sort of designing, if I use the clay build-up brush here, and I need to fill in this little hole. There are other ways we can do this, but let's say we're doing something like this. Quite often you need to just fill this up. The clay brush is really good for that because you can just come into here and just sort of fill this hole up, right? When we're working with hard surface designs in ZBrush, I find it very hacky, like it's really hacky sort of way of working, which is good. Like I don't mind it. And what I mean by hacky is that you just kind of, when we're working in something like Maya or ZBrush or something like that, we really do have, well, at least for myself anyways, like I have a process of working. I find when we're doing this sort of work in ZBrush, you kind of just, if it works sort of thing. All right, the next brush you would want to use is your dam standard. Now this isn't a hard surface brush, so it's BDS. This is like your cutting brush, and this is a good brush for making designs as well. Right, you can see if I hold down Shift, so if I tap on my tool here and then hold down Shift, it drags out this red line, and this red line will show you, will allow you to cut straight lines. So the number that's appearing up here is the angle, and it works in 90 degrees or 45 degrees really. So you got 0 degrees here, and then it goes all the way up to 45. And then when it goes to 45, it'll go back down to 0. So you can make really straight lines just like this. The trick with this brush is that you have to release Shift. And then if you want to make another cut, don't move your mouse or your Wacom pen. You got to press Shift again, and it will allow you to do that cut. Now that one was a little bit deeper because I have symmetry turned on. So if I want that to be turned on, off, or if I don't want that cut to be extra deep, I need to go about halfway. Right. And let's complete that. And again, let's go up here, hold down shift, get a nice straight line, release shift, and then I get a nice straight cut. There's a good way for sort of, coming up with sort of like panel designs and things like that. So if I want to do, let's say 45 degrees out from here. Almost there. It's a bit tricky. Here. Hold down shift again. Let's go back down. Let's do something like that. And let's just cut from here. Now it's I'm going to probably mirror the bottom anyway, so it doesn't matter if it's not exactly right. But you can sort of see the value here where I just come up with different designs and almost there, almost got it. That'll be close enough. And do something like that. So yeah, it's a good cutting brush. You probably wouldn't leave it as this because it is a little bit soft, as you can see. Some people, at least myself anyways, if I want something a bit harsher, I can increase the resolution here to, let's say, 256, and then that can give me a harsher result with my sculpting. Or I can adjust the alpha. So you can see that the alpha here is a very soft alpha. You could pick one of these, or if you have a particular alpha that you already have downloaded, you can load that in. What I would normally do is just go into this side panel, just open it up by double clicking this divider, and then go down to, well, load in my alpha palette, which is this first one in the menu bar. Dock that into the left there. And in the modify panel, we have a slider here called contrast. And it's set to 1 by default, but I can set it to 5. And I can just sort of quickly, if I'm sculpting something, get some nice harsh sort of lines there. So if you find that it's a little bit too soft, you can work with the alpha, adjust the contrast, bring it all the way up to 5, and it might give you the results that you want. Oops. So a little bit tricky. This whole shift, holding down shift, sometimes I forget. Great. So that's that one. I'm going to bring this back to 1. The other brush that you'll be using quite often is your, let's see, your clip brush, right? And you've seen me use this a few times, and your cutting brushes. So your clip brushes are BC in your brush palette. So they're these ones here. I tend just to use the clip curve brush. You do have other presets though, like the clip rect and the clip circle and the clip circle center. Let's say I use the clip curve brush, which is BCC. Right. I can come into here, and that is set to your control shift. So you will get a little pop-up to say, hey, I'm going to assign this to your control shift hotkey. And if I press control shift, you can see it happening on the left there. Now, this I think works best when you're in perspective, not in perspective mode, and you're in orthographic mode. So on the right here in your right toolbar, we have perspective here. So I'm going to press that. So I'm in orthographic. And basically what I can do here is just cut things out. So I can start from the side, and if I click, I can drag out this curve. And if I hold down spacebar, I can move that curve around. So I don't need to get it perfect in the first go. I can just go from here. And basically what this does is that it either cuts something out or pulls to this line. So let's say I want to chip this corner off. I can just hold down Control Shift, start from the top. And basically where that shadow is what's going to get cut. So I can put this about here. And then as I release, it will cut that off. Right. So let's do that. Release, cut that off. And this works best in orthographic because you get the exact cut. If I was still in my perspective mode and I made a cut, just as I did before, you'll notice that if I go back to orthographic, sorry, that the cut's not perfect. You can sort of see that it's on an angle, slight angle, because it's distorted from the perspective. So where you drag and how you drag this clip curve brush matters. So if I drag bottom up, the shadow will be on the opposite side, so on the other side. If I drag down, it will be on the other side. So get used to that. If you make a mistake, it doesn't quite matter because you can just rotate around and you just readjust by holding down spacebar. But it can get a little bit tricky. Now, let's say I wanted to create a nice fillet on this edge here. Right. What I can do is use my clip curve brush, and I'm going to reposition this so it's nice and close. What I can do here, if I press Alt, just press it once, it will allow me to create a nice curve. Right. If I press it twice, it creates an angle. Right. So let's say I'm going to create this fillet here. What I want to do is get it to a point where I want that curve to happen. Press Alt once, and then I can create this nice fillet. It's a bit tricky. You can try to get it in one go like this, or what a lot of people do is just press this multiple times. Right. So start from here. Let's get a nice clip. And let's adjust this. Right, so again, it's a little bit tricky. I'm going to go from here, press Alt to get a nice curve. And a lot trickier than I remembered, to be honest. Great. So we've got this nice fillet. Not that great, but you get the point. So I might start it from here. Let's see if I can get it a little bit better. All right, so I might need to go around. And now I know why people use a lot of pressing the Alt key. Great. So we've got this nice fillet. If I want to have it straight, I'll just press it once or twice, sorry. So let's start that again. Let's say I want to cut this area out here that I've made. And if I wanted to make a straight cut, I'll just press it twice and it makes a nice straight line for me. Right. I can release Shift to stop it snapping. And press Alt twice again and cut that area out. What's cool about the clip brush is that you can cut, but you can also pull things closer to it, right? So let's say I wanted some, like a panel or something like that here. What I can do is hold down Control and create a square. Press spacebar to bring that over to where I want it. Something like that. And then I can invert that that masking just by pressing Control and tapping into the open space. what I can do here is that if I use my clip curve brush, and instead of having the shadow go the other way, so away from the object, if I bring it towards the object, what it does is that it pulls things towards it. So I can get this sort of effect. Right? If I go back to my orthographic mode and just pull this up, you can see I can get this sort of effect quite easily where it's like a panel that's sort of sticking out. It could be anything as a screen or something. You can create buttons or other sort of effects quite easily. So let's say I want to create like a let's say like a screw or something like that. I can easily come into here, hold down Control, mask out this area. Might use a bigger masking pen, this, and invert that by pressing Control, tapping in the open space, and use my clip curve brush and pull that in. So we get this sort of effect. It's pretty low res, but for just concepting, that would work perfectly fine. If I wanted to, what I can do is I can sort of isolate this area. Now that's the clip curve brush. If I wanted to, I can use different methods for this. So the current stroke is the curve brush. And the reason why I only use the clip curve brush is because you can easily just open this stroke panel up and choose the rectangle, the circle, and the lasso. So if you wanted to change it, you have that here. Or you can just use the presets that are up here. Let's say I wanted this curve to be a little bit cleaner. And this is, I guess this is not really a brush anymore, but we have the edge looping buttons here where we can create edge loops around mask points or different features. So if I press Control W and isolate that out and create a poly group, I can then group loops and it creates like a loop there. Now this isn't the best way, so I might soften this out and let's see if I can group this loop. Let's see. Edge masked borders works. I can, it's a bit low res, so it's not giving me the results I want. So I might just subdivide here. Let's just try that again. Right, so I might increase the, in this case here, I might increase the Dynamesh to something a little bit higher. Sometimes to activate the Dynamesh, you have to sort of move something slightly, then just try Dynameshing again. Sometimes it doesn't trigger straight away. So let's say I sort of mask this point out, press Control W to get a nice poly group there. I can come into here and go back to my edge loops and I can create a loop from this group. Right, so you can see that working up the top there. And I'll probably put that Dynamesh up a little bit too high because it shouldn't take this long. And this is where you sort of got to figure out what works best for you. But we have this group loop now. So what I can do is isolate this by pressing Control Shift and tapping on that square, on that object there. I can mask that out. And if I press Control Shift and tap in the open space, it will basically go back to everything. So we can see everything. And if I press Control and tap to invert that mask, what I can do now is then use my clip curve brush and bring that up to about there. And then basically it will pull all of that to that section. So I get this nice sort of cutout, which I think is pretty cool. So the clip curve brush is a very powerful tool. It's probably your main tool for like cutting things out. just because of how easy it is and how clean it is. Right. I might redo this Dynamesh so it's not so high res. And at this point, when we're doing this sort of stuff, I wouldn't worry too much if things are a little bit blurry, right? So we are still concepting, and so it's okay for things to be blurry for quite some time. What we really want is speed, right? So your next brush that you'll be using often would be your trim brushes, which is, I got a button for it here. But if I press BT for trim, you'll see there over here. So you trim lasso, you trim rectangle, and you trim curve, right? It works very much the same as your clip curve, except it's more just about cutting. So it doesn't really pull anything, doesn't do any of that. It's all about cutting pieces out. And if I press Alt, it will work the exact same way, where we can create smoother corners, or if we press Alt twice, it'll create a sharp edge. Right, so treat this as like a cutting brush. It's really just to cut things out. But what's cool about this is that we can create panels quite easily here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to, let's say, split this. I wanted to create a sort of feature here where it's just sort of got this cutout feature. If I press Control Shift and then spacebar, I have this thing called B radius. So this B radius, which is your brush radius, will determine the sort of the size of that cut. So if I make this brush really, really small, something like this, and then I, let's say, make this sort of cut here, like this, release, what would happen is that I'll slice the mesh, but I'll actually make two polygroups. Now, what I didn't do was actually hold down Alt, right? So it's what I want is actually the invert of this. So I'm going to try that again. Whoops. Yeah, I don't want that. So double tap Alt, and if I hold down Alt as I release, what it will do is the invert of what happened before. So I'll pretty much keep everything but that little strip there that I've cut. And what that's good for is that I can create panels quite easily. So you can see that there's a little gap there. And there's a bit of artifacting, but that's okay. We can sort of clean that up a little bit later. But what we've just done is created this panel, right? So I can easily isolate things out like this. And then like sort of scale this thing up. So it's not fully cut through the whole thing. So I might have to check that a bit later. So maybe the Dynamesh is a bit too high or something, but it works really well for paneling things out. Right. So your next brush that you'll be using often is your planar brushes and your sort of flattening brushes. So let's say, for example, I wanted to create this nice flat edge here. What I can do is use my planar brush to flatten this edge out. So there are many ways you can do this. So you can just press BPL, which is your planar brush. But trying to do this can be quite difficult, right? If you get it in one go, then it sort of works. But sometimes it can be a bit tricky to grab that edge. So what I normally do is combine that with another brush, which is your clay tubes. So there's BCT, which is this one here. And if I hold down Alt, so I'm going to reduce my brush size and just cut into that mesh a little bit, I can create this sort of effect here, right? I'm not going to move it too much, but I just wanted to flatten that edge out. And if I use my planar brush, which is BPL, I can continue that planar across quite easily. Now, how the planar works is that you'll first brush stroke samples that flat surface, and it just continues that across. So if I sample this and just go across, it will continue that planar across. Now, that wasn't the best one, so I'm just going to try that again. So I hold down Alt, just sample that flat edge there, and let's try that again. This is what I mean by like it being like hacky in a way. Like there's not one way of doing this thing. There's many ways of doing the same thing. And it kind of gets to the point where if it's good, it's good. You just got to work with it. Right. In this case, it's not really working with me. So it might just be easier to use my clip curve brush and just literally cut that out. But on smaller objects, your planar brushes work really well. If you're sort of wanting to make some areas flat, I guess this is a better example. Let's say, for example, I use my clay buildup and I just cut in here for some reason. And I really need this area to be flat. Your planar brush will be a very good tool for this because we can sample this flat area that we really, really want everywhere else to be. And then I can just brush over that sort of area there. So might need a bigger brush here. So just let me turn that color off. So you can sort of see that. Let's bring that intensity all the way up. It's being a bit weird. All right, so I've got to press Alt. So for some reason it's on Z sub. So I'm just going to put that back on Z add, which is just by default should be on Z add. So it samples a certain area. And if I bring that across, I can easily flatten that out. And if I combine that with a smoothing, which is just shift, I can easily flatten that area out. Now, don't worry about this black part here. I just had that. For some reason, I had the color on, so RGB color. I can just sort of get rid of that if I wanted to, but it's kind of there until I turn it off. So I can come into here and just turn the poly paint off. Right. So planar brush, it's a little bit tricky to use, but it's very helpful in certain situations. It's a good way of just sort of deleting things, I think, because it samples the surface and then it just continues. It just brings everything up with it. Okay, so another brush that you'll use a lot is your polish brush. Right, so that is your high polish, so H polish. So it's BHP on the keyboard, and it's this one here. So this brush works really well at smoothing areas out, like that. I'm gonna bring down the intensity a little bit, and it works by sort of sampling an area like this. And it sort of continues that. And if you if you combine that with your smoothing, you can get a nice sort of fillet, or you can like smooth areas out that should be smoothed out. So let's say, for example, this area here, you can sort of smooth this out quite easily, right? And this is your main brush for like getting smooth sort of curved surfaces. So if I use my move brush and let's say I move something up, right? This. And so I have an area like this that I want to smooth out. Your high polish works really well for this. So it's really good for getting dents out. But you want to be careful because you don't want to scrub back and forth too much because you can, ruin the surface a bit. So you just want to be a bit careful with how you do it. I like to sort of just take my pen off the Wacom tablet and just do like larger sort of strokes like this. I find that works really well for smoothing things out. And then if you combine that with your smooth, you can really get a nice smooth surface. So you can sort of see that as I smooth things out, it's not exactly perfect. And that's because I'm working with a very high density model, and the smooth brush is just not strong enough to sort of smooth that out. So quite often you'll use another smooth brush, which is a just more intense version of that current smooth brush. So that isn't in your brush palette. That's actually in your lightbox. So if I go up to the top toolbar and go to lightbox here and just go to brush, and if I scroll to the right or look towards the right, I can find a folder called smooth. Open that up. And over here you have a smooth brush called Smooth Stronger. This is just saying that it's going to be assigned to your shift key. And as the name suggests, it's just a stronger version of smooth. So I can really smooth some areas out that just need that extra brush strength, right? So when it's really high density meshes, the regular smooth just doesn't work very well, right? You definitely want to use the Smooth Stronger for that. Okay, so let's take a look at some other ones. There's some new brushes that come in the latest ZBrush, and that's your bevel brushes. So there's BB, and they're all the way at the start here. So bevel arc and bevel flat. So let's use the bevel flat here. And as the name suggests, it's to bevel edges. So how this brush works is pretty interesting. So if I go back to ortho mode, basically what it does is that you sort of sample the thickness of your bevel. So from here down to here. And if I pull back, so if I pull this brush back up, it will activate the actual bevel brush. So right now we're just gauging the size of that bevel. And if I pull the brush up, I can then continue that. So it's a cool brush because I can easily just grab this and bevel this area out. And if there's any areas that I need to continue that beveling, I can just use my planar brush and then just continue that across. In this case, it's not really working that well. Let's see. So Z sub. Just having issues with this planar brush today. So that's a really good brush for adding bevels quite easily, as you saw there. And then also you had your bevel arc, which is adding nice fillets. So let's say, for example, I have a straight edge here that I want to have a nice rounded corner. So let's cut this up a little bit more. And it works the same way as your bevel brush. So I can go bevel arc. What I need to do is just sample the size of this arc. So that's the size that I want. And if I pull back up, it will get that nice arc motion or arc look. So a great way for filleting, right? So most people still use this, I find. As you can see, I haven't used it in a very long time because it's a little bit tricky to use, to be honest. I find it a bit odd. A lot of people would probably use like, again, a lot of people use a lot of these, pressing Alt a lot and just sort of coming into here like that and trying to create a nice smooth area. But I find that a bit hard to use, to be honest. And the bevel brushes, when they've come in, it's just been really, really nice because I can easily just come into here and just bevel something out. And just, if I wanted a nice soft area, I can easily do that. So that's a really good brush for that, obviously. There are other brushes as well. So you got your trim dynamics or your trim brushes. We talked about these ones, but we talk about these other brushes here. So your trim dynamic and your trim adaptive, which are really commonly used in this hard surface sort of designs. And basically what that does is that it sort of flattens things out, right? So you can sort of flatten areas out and it sort of reacts to the surface. So I find doing big broad strokes works really well. But if you're sort of trying to smooth an area out, so you're trying to get a nice curve, let's say this is a bit messed up, your trim dynamic works really well at just flattening curves out, basically, or smoothing curves out, and combining that with your smooth brush. Right. Great. And I think that's the main brushes that you'll use. There are so many other hard surface brushes in your Lightbox. So you have a whole section for trims. You have a whole section for planar brushes, which are used in your hard surface designs. Let's take a look at some of these. So your trim, you kind of just have to use them to get an idea what they do. But let's say we use like trim smooth borders is great, right? Because it allows you to flatten areas out or trim areas out, but sort of keep like a nice hard edge in a way. You can sort of see that here. So a nice brush for keeping a nice hard edge on your borders, right? Great, so I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at another one. Your trim holes is one that I use a lot as well, which is this one here. This one's good for just putting holes, so punching holes in your mesh like that. So let's say we punch a hole here and then we use the IMM brushes, which we can use the industrial ones, which is this one here. And then we can just like add a screw or something like that, right? I forgot as well that we can hold down spacebar and we can move this this thing around. So if we didn't get it right the first time, we can do that. Great. Cool. So the trim hole one is good because it just sort of it makes a hole, but then it doesn't. It's good for like angles as well. Whoops. So trim holes. So let's say we do one here, right? You can easily flatten this area out like that. Probably wasn't the best example. Let's say we did something like this, and we press Alt, and we bring this shape out. So we can bring things out quite nicely. I think that's a pretty cool way of quickly concepting like a hole coming out. Okay? Could be like a connection to a pipe or something like that. If we did it to a flat surface, it'll be much better. So it comes towards the screen, by the way. Forgot to mention that. Right. But what's cool about this is that I can just keep like going back and forth on my tablet and it just keeps going. Let's just Dynamesh that quickly and we can get this sort of look. Right, and that could just be like a connection point for like another cable or something like that. And then if I use a smaller brush, then hold down Alt, not hold down Alt, just go in. And create a little divot there, right? So that could be like a an antenna or something like that coming out. I can quickly come into here, my subtools, and append a new shape, or use my IMM brushes, which is my primitive brushes, and then use the insert cylinder, which I have here already. I could use like a bend curve or something like that. Twist, which one do I want? This one here. Great. So you can see I created this really quick and easy. It's quite fun to do. If I wanted that to be a bit tighter or sharper, what I can do is just grab this and use my cut brush, so my trim curve brush, and just cut this area here. Oops, wrong area. So what I want to do is maybe my trim curve brush, just cut that right off. Right, too much. Cool. All right, so that's that brush, and I think that's pretty much it for your main brushes. If anything comes to mind, I'll make another video, but those are the main ones. This video is getting a bit long. Your clip curve brush is probably one of your most used brushes. Your high polish is another one. Also, your trim curve. It's just like another cutting brush. As well as your general sort of hard surface brushes like your, like your trim dynamics, your high polish, and so on. To just do your general concepting, you'll still use your regular brushes. Sorry, that wasn't working because I had B radius on. I was wondering why that was being a bit weird. Your general brushes. So you can either use primitives where you just sort of add and combine primitives together, or if you're really trying to concept something, your clay buildup is perfectly fine for that, right? So if you're just trying to concept some designs, come into here and hold down Alt and then just try to work out some panels and things like that, using your smooth, like this is still a valid way of doing things, right? You don't. There's multiple different approaches I think to take when you're doing this sort of hard surface design. It's just whatever works for you, I think.